A father had just buried his 5-year-old son. The grief was still fresh. The kind of grief that feels unreal, like the world around you is moving but your life has stopped. But almost immediately after the funeral, someone asked him a question. So, when does the tour resume? That single question would close the door on one of the greatest bands in music history. Because the man they asked was Robert Plant, and the band was Led Zeppelin. And what happened next would change rock music forever. To understand why, you have to go back to 1977. At the time, Led Zeppelin weren't just successful, they were unstoppable. They were the biggest rock band in the world. Their concerts filled massive stadiums. Tickets disappeared within minutes. Fans treated them less like musicians and more like gods. Their music had already become legendary, especially songs like Stairway to Heaven, which many people still consider one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. The band itself was a powerhouse: Robert Plant on vocals, Jimmy Page on guitar, John Paul Jones on bass and keyboards, and the thunderous drummer John Bonham. Together, they had created something enormous. Money poured in faster than it could be counted. The band traveled on private jets, stayed in luxury hotels, and performed in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans every night. The machine of fame and success never stopped moving. And that was exactly the problem. Because machines don't pause for grief. In July of 1977, Robert Plant was touring the United States with Led Zeppelin when tragedy struck back home in England. His 5-year-old son, Carrick Pendragon Plant, suddenly became ill. At first, it seemed like nothing serious. Just a stomach virus. But within a short time, things took a devastating turn. Then the phone call came. Carrick had died. Just like that. There was no warning. No chance to rush home. No opportunity to say goodbye. Robert Plant immediately left the tour and flew back to England, carrying a grief that felt impossible to understand. The man who once stood confidently in front of massive crowds now felt hollow. The power and energy that had fueled Led Zeppelin's music suddenly felt meaningless. Because nothing, no applause, no spotlight, no amount of fame could undo the loss of a child. After the funeral, while Plant was still processing what had happened, the music industry began asking questions. But they weren't asking about his pain. They weren't asking how he was coping. Instead, they asked the question that would stay with him forever. When does the tour resume? To the business side of music, everything had to keep moving. Tickets had been sold. Stadiums were booked. Fans were waiting. The band was worth millions of dollars. Stopping the tour meant losing enormous amounts of money. But to Robert Plant, that question felt deeply wrong. The music that once felt powerful now felt empty. The stage lights felt harsh. Even singing felt dishonest. Led Zeppelin's music had always been built on strength, energy, and dominance. But after losing his son, that kind of power felt grotesque. Plant realized something important. If he returned to the stage too soon, the machine of fame would simply absorb his tragedy. His child's death would become nothing more than background noise. And that was something he could not allow. Management tried to convince him otherwise. They told him the same things the industry always says. The fans are waiting. The band needs you. This is how you survive grief. But Robert Plant refused. And that refusal mattered more than people realized. Because in the world of rock music, stars weren't supposed to stop. You were supposed to drown your pain in alcohol, noise, and endless touring. You kept moving forward, no matter what happened. Because if you stopped, the machine replaced you. For a while, Led Zeppelin tried to keep going. But something had already changed. The momentum that once made the band unstoppable was beginning to show its darker side. Then, 3 years later, tragedy struck again. In September 1980, during rehearsals for another tour, drummer John Bonham spent the day drinking heavily. Bonham had always been known for his wild lifestyle, but this time things went too far. That night, he consumed an enormous amount of alcohol. The next morning, he was found dead. John Bonham had choked on his own vomit in his sleep. He was only 32 years old. The band was devastated. But for Robert Plant, something became painfully clear. This wasn't just bad luck. It was the cost of the machine. The same unstoppable momentum that had made Led Zeppelin famous was now destroying the people inside it. After Bonham's death, the remaining members of Led Zeppelin faced an enormous decision. They could continue. Many bands would have. They could hire a new drummer, continue touring, and keep the money flowing. Fans would still come. Promoters would still pay. But Robert Plant said no. He told Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones something simple but final. "We're not doing this again. Without John Bonham, Led Zeppelin could not exist." And more importantly, Plant no longer wanted the machine that had taken so much from him. So the band made a shocking announcement. Led Zeppelin was finished. There would be no farewell tour. No final album. No carefully staged goodbye. They simply stopped. Walking away from Led Zeppelin meant walking away from one of the most profitable names in music history. Over the years, reunion offers poured in. Promoters offered hundreds of millions of dollars. Fans begged for just one more tour. The music industry waited for Robert Plant to change his mind. But he never did. Every offer arrived bigger than the last. And every answer stayed the same. No. Some fans criticized him for it. They called him selfish. They said he owed the fans more music. But Robert Plant understood something many people didn't. Some things are not meant to be resurrected. Instead of trying to preserve the voice that made him famous, Plant reinvented himself. He lowered his vocal range. He let go of the powerful scream that once defined Led Zeppelin's sound. He explored new styles of music: folk, blues, and world rhythms. Some critics called it decline. But to Robert Plant, it was something else entirely. It was survival. Years later, he explained it in a single heartbreaking sentence. "I couldn't be that man anymore. He died with my son." Today, many people still remember Robert Plant as the golden god of rock. But that image stops the story before the damage. Because the most powerful thing he ever did wasn't he standing on stage in front of thousands of fans. It was walking away. In an industry built on endless comebacks, reunions, and nostalgia tours, Robert Plant did something almost unheard of. He refused to resurrect the past. And sometimes, the most radical act isn't excess. It's simply saying no. So what do you think? Did Robert Plant make the right decision by ending Led Zeppelin forever, or should the band have continued after John Bonham's death? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.